For nearly 15 years. Red Hollow Ranch lay quiet at the edge of the New Mexico desert, where the wind carried more memories than voices, and the sunsets bled like old wounds. Across the sky, the man who lived there, Elias Crowder, had long since turned his back on the noise of the world. Once a feared trail scout and one hell of a sharpshooter, Elias had buried his rifles, buried his youth, and buried the part of himself that cared about much of anything. He lived alone, spoke little, and woke each morning with the same grim acceptance a man has when he knows his past is longer than his future. Every day was the same: wake with the sunrise, tend the horses, fix a fence, warm a pot of beans, sip black coffee that tasted like burnt earth, and listen, always listen, to the desert's long, aching silence. Elias lived like a ghost, not quite dead, not quite alive. Until the morning everything changed. He first heard the sound, 5 steps, slow and hesitant, before he saw the figures moving across the desert. At first he thought it was a trick of heat, the wavering mirage that fooled many a cowboy into imagining people who weren't there. But the figures kept getting closer, steady, real, shaped by the sunlight. 5 women. Then he noticed what they wore. Buckskin dresses torn at the edges, garments marked with long travel, dust clinging to their braids. Their silhouettes were thin, hungry, exhausted. Then he saw their eyes. Not fear, not shame. Desperation. They approached the ranch gate with the quiet dignity of those who had already buried too much to cry anymore. And then one stepped forward. She looked a little older than the others. Her dark hair streaked with silver, but her posture was firm. "We seek shelter," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. Elias stiffened. "You're far from your homes." "We have no homes left," she said. "Not since the soldiers came." That sentence hit Elias like a hammer. He knew what soldiers could do. He had seen it. Hell, he had survived it. He had killed for it. And for a moment, the old guilt buried deep in his chest stirred like the rattle of a dying snake. "These women," the leader continued, "are widows. All of us. Our men were killed. Our shelters burned. We have walked far, too far." Her voice cracked for a heartbeat. "We heard about you, Crowder. About the white man who lives alone but turns no one away." "That ain't true," Elias muttered. "Then make it true today," she said. The words sank into him like spurs. He studied them carefully now. The youngest looked barely 20 summers old. Their clothes were ripped. Their arms were scratched from brush and thorns. One woman limped faintly, hiding an injury she didn't want pity for. They did not beg with their voices. They begged with their silence. Elias took off his hat, wiped the sweat from his brow, and let the desert wind whip across his face. He didn't want this responsibility. He didn't want anyone near him. But he knew what hunger looked like, and what hopelessness sounded like. "Fine," he muttered. "You can stay, but only temporary. Food's scarce. Water too." Their expressions softened only slightly, but enough that he saw life flicker in their eyes. "We thank you," the leader said, bowing. Names were exchanged. The leader was Nayeli. The others, Tala, Onida, Suni, and Kaya, stood close behind her, each carrying grief in her gaze but strength in her posture. That night, Elias cooked more food than he had cooked in years. Beans, cornbread scraps, salted jerky he had saved for winter. He watched them eat, their movements slow, ritualistic, almost reverent. It had been a long time since any of them had eaten a full meal. When the fire settled into hot coals, Nayeli finally spoke. "You wonder why we came here? I reckon it's because you needed shelter." "That is the start," she said softly. "But not the whole truth." Elias froze, hand halfway to the coffee pot. "We were told," Nayeli continued, "that you are not like other white men." Elias stiffened. "That you understand suffering. That you know what it is to lose." He looked away sharply. The firelight flickered across the scars on his knuckles, the old burn that ran down his forearm. The lines on his face carved not by age but by memories. She wasn't wrong. "I don't want no trouble," he muttered. "Neither do we," she answered. "But trouble follows us." The wind howled across the ranch, and somewhere in the darkness a lone coyote cried out. Elias leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Someone chasing you?" Nayeli hesitated. Then she lowered her voice. "Yes." The others tensed, their faces turning toward the darkness, listening to invisible footsteps in the wind. Elias felt a surge of irritation. He had offered them shelter, not a war. Who? Men, Naeli said. Cowards. They followed us from the ruins of our camp. They hunt the helpless. They steal, they burn, they do worse. Her voice trembled with disgust. We escaped. They will not allow that. Elias clenched his jaw as anger simmered inside him. Not at the women, but at whatever beasts had done this to them. Men like that. He had seen them before, ridden with some of them once, before he learned that a bullet fired in the name of greed did not weigh any lighter. On a man's soul. They will come here, Naeli said. I am certain. Elias stared into the fire. He didn't want trouble. He didn't want bloodshed. He didn't want memories. But he also wasn't the kind of man who let wolves walk onto his land to tear apart the helpless. Finally, he said, if they come, I'll deal with them. Naeli exhaled, relief mixed with guilt. You owe us nothing, she said. I ain't doing it for you, he growled. I'm doing it 'cause I don't tolerate cowards. Silence settled between them, warm and heavy like a wool blanket. For the first time in years, Elias didn't feel alone at his fire. Something about these 5 women stirred an old part of him. He thought long dead, duty maybe, or humanity. As the fire dimmed, he watched them fall asleep on the blankets he laid out in the barn. They slept close together, like sisters who had clung to each other through storms. The gentle sound of their breathing filled the quiet night. Elias leaned on the doorway of the barn, arms crossed, and stared out at the dark desert. He had let them in. He had allowed the silence of his life to break. And something told him, something deep, instinctive, that the storm coming toward Red Hollow Ranch would change all of their lives forever. Behind him, Naeli stirred in her sleep, murmuring something in a soft, broken whisper. Elias looked back at them, not as strangers now, but as people fate had placed in his path. And for the first time in years, the retired cowboy felt the weight of purpose return to his shoulders. A purpose he didn't yet understand. But he would soon, very soon. The next morning broke with a hard, metallic light, one of those unforgiving desert sunrises that cut the world in sharp edges. Elias Crowder woke before dawn, stood on the porch with a mug of bitter coffee, and watched the sky bleed from violet to gold. But he wasn't watching the sunrise. He was listening. Listening for horses, listening for engines, listening for the trouble Naeli promised. Behind him, the ranch felt different. The quiet that once comforted him now felt tense, fragile, as though the world was holding its breath. The 5 women slept inside the barn. He'd checked on them at least twice during the night, not because he didn't trust them, but because something about them stirred an old instinct in him. A protector's instinct, one he thought he had long since buried beside the men he lost in old battles. When the sun finally cleared the ridge, Elias turned and found Naeli standing at the barn door. She looked rested, though the shadows beneath. Her eyes told a deeper story, a story written in sleepless nights. Dead husbands, burned shelters, and forced marches across unforgiving land. We felt safer here, she said softly. Elias nodded. You ain't safe yet. The other women emerged, Tala with her fierce, proud posture, Onita rubbing a sore ankle, Kea raising her face toward the morning wind, Suni clutching a bundle of herbs she'd collected from the ranch's edge. They gathered in a small circle near the corral. Naeli approached Elias again. We are grateful, but gratitude alone does not stop men like the ones hunting us. You told me 5 men, Elias said. 5 to start, she corrected. But they joined with others along the way. They raid villages. They take what they want. No law stops them. Elias clenched his jaw. He'd known men like that. He'd ridden with some during his reckless youth. Men who believed cruelty wasn't a sin but a sport. Men who thought the world owed them fear. He spat into the dust. They ain't taking anything from my land. Naeli's eyes softened. We didn't come here to bring death to your doorstep. Sometimes death finds you whether you invite it or not. By afternoon, Elias prepared the ranch like a man expecting a storm.
He checked every rifle, cleaned every revolver,
Replaced old boards on the fence, checked the water barrels, secured the livestock, and gathered enough supplies to last days if things went bad. The women helped silently, clearing brush, gathering firewood, patching tears in their clothing. There was a strange calm about them. They were no strangers to survival. You ever handled a rifle? He asked Tala. She lifted her chin. My father taught me when I was 10 summers old. He handed her an old Winchester. She held it with steady hands. "Good," he said. Later, as the sky dimmed toward dusk, Oneida approached with a quiet, uncertain voice. "You do not have to fight for us, Crowder." He looked at her thin frame, at the grief buried behind her gentle eyes. "I ain't fighting for you," he said in his usual rough way. "I'm fighting because men like that ain't welcome anywhere in this valley. Not on my land, not on anyone's." The wind howled across the plains, long, mournful, warning of change. And that's when they heard it. Distant hoofbeats, slow, heavy, intentional. The women froze. Their eyes widened, not with panic, but with recognition. "They've found us," Kaya whispered. Elias didn't hesitate. He stepped onto the porch, rolled his shoulders, grabbed his long rifle, and squinted into the horizon. 5 riders were approaching, silhouettes against the dying sun. Behind them, a plume of dust marked their path. "Get inside," he said. "We will not hide," Tala answered. "You ain't hiding. You're staying alive." Reluctantly, they retreated to the shadows of the barn. Elias moved to the gate and waited. The riders slowed as they neared, spreading into a half-circle, each smirking with the arrogance of men who believed they owned anything they pointed at. The leader, a tall brute with a scar from his cheek to his jaw, raised a hand. "Evening," he called out with mock friendliness. "We're looking for some lost women. 5 of them passed through here. Maybe begged for a bed or 2. Elias said nothing. Scarface smiled. "We don't want trouble, old man. We just came to collect what's ours." "They ain't yours," Elias said. One of the men laughed. "Everything becomes ours if we want it bad enough." "You got the wrong ranch," Elias replied, voice low. "Turn around, ride west. You might live to see sunrise." The men exchanged glances, first shocked, then amused. Scarface leaned forward. "You got a death wish, cowboy?" "No," Elias said. "But I ain't afraid of dying." Scarface spat. "Where are they?" Elias took a breath. "Gone." "Liar." Elias raised the rifle. The world froze. The men reached for their guns. Elias fired first. The sound cracked through the desert like thunder. One rider fell sideways off his horse before he could even draw. Horses reared. Dust exploded. Chaos erupted like a firestorm. The women inside the barn pressed against the wooden slats, watching through narrow cracks, breathless. Scarface roared, "Kill him!" But Elias moved with the old reflexes of a man who'd lived too many years on the edge of death. He ducked behind a fence post, fired again, dropped another rider with a shot to the shoulder that sent him tumbling. Bullets tore through the porch railing. One grazed Elias's sleeve, ripping fabric. He didn't flinch. From the barn, Tala couldn't take it anymore. She ran out with the Winchester, braced herself, and fired. Her shot hit one of the raiders in the leg, knocking him off balance. "Stay back!" Elias barked. But now the women were out, Nayeli pulling Oneida to safety, Kaya dragging Suni behind a water trough, Tala loading another round with trembling hands. The men regrouped. Scarface fired wildly toward them. "Burn the place if you have to!" "Bring me those women!" A bullet shattered the corral gate. One of the horses screamed and bolted. The dust thickened as the raiders dismounted and charged toward the barn. Elias ran forward, slamming into one of them with the force of a bull. The man toppled backward as Elias wrested the gun from his hand and shoved him face first into the dirt. Another raider swung the butt of his rifle, striking Elias hard across the shoulder. Elias staggered but didn't fall. Inside the barn, Nayeli grabbed a shovel and swung it in a clean arc, striking the attacker who tried to enter. He collapsed, stunned. Scarface charged toward Elias with a knife drawn. "You should have stayed retired." Elias raised his revolver, but Scarface tackled him before he could fire. They crashed into the dirt, rolling violently. Elias's hat flew off. Scarface jammed the knife downward. Elias caught his wrist inches from his throat. Struggling, veins bulging with effort. The women watched in horror. Tala raised the Winchester, hands shaking, breath shallow. "No," Nayeli whispered. "You might hit Crowder." But Tala steadied herself. Elias grunted, trying to twist the knife away. Scarface snarled, "She's mine." "All of them are mine." "No," Elias growled back. "They ain't property." With a burst of strength, Elias shoved Scarface sideways, but the knife slashed across his arm. Drawing blood, pain shot through him. Scarface lunged again, and Tala fired. The shot cracked. Scarface jerked backward, dropping the knife. Elias scrambled to his feet, grabbed his revolver, and aimed it at Scarface's chest. The outlaw stared at Elias, stunned, blood soaking his coat. "You'll regret this," he hissed. Elias pulled the trigger. Scarface fell silent forever. The dust settled. The remaining raiders fled into the desert, their courage evaporating as quickly as their leader's life. Silence reclaimed Red Hollow Ranch, a long, trembling silence. The women rushed to Elias. Nayeli pressed herbs against his bleeding arm. Tala was still shaking, tears gathering in her eyes. I thought I missed, she whispered. "You didn't," Elias said, breathing hard. "You saved my life." For the first time since they arrived, the women saw him not as a hardened recluse, but as a man willing to bleed for those he owed nothing to. Nayeli touched his shoulder gently. "Why did you risk so much?" Elias looked at them, really looked. 5 widows standing in the fading light, carrying scars they didn't earn, strength they didn't choose, and hope they barely held on to. "Because no one else ever did for me," he said softly. "And maybe the good Lord gave me one last thing worth fighting for." Nayeli's eyes shimmered, not with sorrow this time, but with something warm and dangerous. Trust. That night, Elias sat on the porch again, his arm bandaged, the women gathered nearby, tending the fire. The ranch no longer felt empty, no longer felt dead. Something new had grown there. Not just safety, not just gratitude. A family the desert had built from broken pieces, and a purpose Elias Crowder never expected to find again. Thanks for watching. Partners, if this story pulled you in, if the suspense kept your heart racing, hit that like, smash that subscribe, and ring the bell icon so you don't miss any more Wild West tales. Your support helps us bring these powerful stories to life. Stay tuned. The desert has many more secrets to tell.